what you need to do.
Thanks, Mike. All right. Well, it's my job to officially welcome Unit 3 this afternoon to the We the People National Finals. My name's Emily Voss. I'll be your facilitator and your timekeeper. And during the course of the proceedings this afternoon, I will be periodically holding up your 1 minute and your time sign. But I'm not going to interject at all. So I'm just going to hold it up. If you're in the middle of a thought, by all means, please finish your thought. All right, so in just a moment, I will hand things over to your judge panel. They'll introduce themselves. Y'all can introduce yourselves and your coach, and then you're very familiar with the proceedings from there. They'll read you the question, you will respond with your prepared statement, and then the judges will have follow-up questions for you. All right, so with that, I will hand things over to the judges to get us started.
Please don't be misled by what she said. She may not unmute herself and interject herself, but when we ask a question and Emily rolls her eyes and slaps her head like this, we notice that she's done it. So, hopefully she won't have to today, because y'all are going to take care of that. Yeah, I think y'all will keep her off of us. At least I hope you will anyhow. Dr. Rogers, this is my bunch right here. I love this bunch. I haven't seen this unit. I haven't worked with them in any way. That's the rules, and Amy and I always play by the rules, no pun intended. Dr. Rogers, you want to say good morning to them?
So it's actually good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, folks. Great to see you. It's a great thing that you've made it all the way to the national finals after the challenging year that we've had. I'm Donald Rogers. I taught history at Central Connecticut State University before I retired. I've been involved with We the People for a very long time. It's a great program to be part of, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
My name is Joe Stewart. I teach in the political science department at Clemson University, another school that occasionally plays football. It's always great. Both of my parents grew up in Alabama. Jason, how many units are you on? I think I've seen on some other units too.
4 at least. I think he's on 4 of them.
Yeah. So, but I always enjoy having a conversation, and I always learn something from the Alabama team. So it's great to see you, and great to see your teacher, Ms. Maddox, too. She does a wonderful job.
It sure is. Joe, tell him you got kinfolk in Alabama, don't you?
That's, and some of them aren't in jail either. So,
which means some of them are, but some of them aren't. And I'm Mike Miles, and I live down the hill from your school. So even though I have not seen your unit before, we're old and good friends, and I won't even start talking about Amy because I wouldn't be able to stop. What a good friend she is. Tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Jason. We're from Vestavia Hills High School. I'm going to be attending Yale University next year, and I'm planning on majoring in mechanical engineering.
Hello, I'm Ricky Tong, and I'll be attending Georgia Tech and changing major on computer science and engineering.
Hi, I'm Kenneth Lowe. I'll be attending Virginia Tech and majoring in computer science. Our teacher is Miss Amy Maddox, and we're happy to be here today.
Amy, couldn't you find some highly intelligent, intellectual? I can't believe for y'all. You tried. You did the best you could, right? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. One time she brought us one who said that she was going to some really fine school to study political science. And all 3 judges yelled, "Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Study something else." So I'm glad to see you have picked something a whole lot more easy to discuss, I guess, than this. I know that you know this question by heart, but as I understand it, Amy, we're taping this so people can see it. So for the purpose of the tape, which Joe Stewart said is probably going to go viral sometime tonight or tomorrow, I'll read the question very quickly, and then we'll get out of the way and let y'all take us on a trip. This is question 1, and it's a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. "I do not think the United States would come to an end if we lost our power to declare an act of Congress void." I like to argue that with him sometimes. "I do think the Union would be imperiled if we could not make that declaration as to the laws of the several states. What impact has judicial review had on federalism? Is judicial review a counter-majoritarian practice?" And please support. "What limits, if any, would you place on the practice of judicial review. If you can do that in 4 minutes, but I believe this group can. So if you're ready, take over.
Thank you, Mayor again.
Yes, sir.
It is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. Judicial review is the court's power to invalidate government actions on the grounds that they are unconstitutional. Though the Constitution's framers never explicitly delegated this power to the courts, the practice of judicial review has long been accepted. The Marshall Court's decision in Marbury versus Madison in 1803 represented the first time the Supreme Court would strike down an act of Congress. The power to interpret the Constitution includes the power to interpret the boundaries of federalism. During the Lochner era, the court consistently struck down both state and national economic regulation in cases like Lochner v. New York in 1905 and United States versus EC9 Company in 1895. They cited the doctrine of economic substantive due process, which argued the 14th Amendment protected the liberty of contract. However, this tendency to strike down federal power largely ended with New Deal cases such as West Coast Hotel versus Parrish in 1937. From there, incorporation has been the court's most impactful use of judicial review, with cases like Gitlow v. New York in 1925 and Gideon v. Wainwright in 1963 shutting down state action that infringed on citizens' rights guaranteed by the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause.
In some cases, judicial review is counter-majoritarian. The ability to reinterpret our very structure of federalism, combined with lifetime tenure, means that judges and justices can shape society without much accountability to the public. While we agree judicial review can be counter-majoritarian, we agree the counter-majoritarian nature of the court is not a pitfall. During the Constitutional Convention, the framers prioritized an independent court with lifetime tenures to ensure judges can make decisions without public pressure or corrupt influences. A majoritarian version of the court will be no court at all. Furthermore, judicial review still has its limits. The Supreme Court can only declare specific executive or legislative actions unconstitutional. The political branches can still pass new legislation or declare new executive orders that meet the court's standards. For example, Congresswoman Terry Sewell is the lead proponent of the new John Lewis Voting Rights Act that would change the standards of court shutdown in Shelby County v. Holder. Additionally, court cases can be superseded by amendments, as when the 13th and 14th Amendment overturned Dred Scott v. Sanford. Lastly, the political branches can refuse to enforce any counter-majoritarian decision as a controversial last resort. Infamously, in Worcester v. Georgia in 1832, Andrew Jackson refused to enforce the decision. Though these events are rare, the threat of such refusal serves as a check on judicial review.
Putting further limits on judicial review could threaten the delicate balance between the three branches. Rather than weakening court power, our priority should be to limit the use of judicial review and prevent the politicization of the courts. One possible solution would be to require a 6-3 supermajority to strike down federal statutes, decreasing the frequency of judicial review, as around 20% of Supreme Court decisions are decided on a 5-4 split. Additionally, the appointment and confirmation process should be reformed. For appointees, prior rulings and political rulings play key roles in the nomination process. The last three justices, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, have had controversial political maneuverings to find their confirmations. Reform should better secure judicial independence from the volatile political branches. Throughout history, judicial review has been used like any other power, for both right and wrong. Despite past mistakes, we argue the court's isolation and power to check the other branches outweigh the negatives. Judicial review is already a limited power. Rather than threatening the court with the loss of power, we should foster its respect, impartiality, and independence. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Rogers, take them on, Clark.
Did the constitutional basis by which the Supreme Court struck down state laws change over time? I mean, what constitutional, clauses did the court turn to in the early years of the 19th century, and what clauses does it turn to today?
I think it's definitely changed over time. I think the original basis for judicial review largely relied on the Article 6, which was the supremacy clause of the Constitution. But as we saw with the 14th Amendment, which introduces incorporation to the states, where Congress has the power to enforce the Bill of Rights on the states, we see that the Supreme Court has been using the due process clause for most of its decisions nowadays when it comes to striking down state policies.
I definitely agree with Jason there. I think we look at earlier cases prior to the 14th Amendment. We can look at Chisholm v. Georgia, where the court in a 4-1 decision, they used Article 3, Section 2, that it was against the federal sovereign, it went against the state sovereign immunity and granted federal courts the affirmative power to hear essentially rules over the states, I think. And then we could look at other cases like Wary Hilton, where it was the first case that struck down state laws, and that was based on what Jason said, the supremacy clause. And when we look at today, we could see how the 14th Amendment is more often quoted instead of the supremacy clause.
As for what clause gives the Supreme Court the power of judicial review, it's not directly stated, but the first statement in Article 3, which says the judicial power of the United States shall be vested into the Supreme Court, I believe this is some sort of like enumerated powers that allows the Supreme Court some leeway, and I think this is what gives the Supreme Court the power of judicial review.
Okay, as I understand it, you're saying we'd be better off if the Supreme Court were a little bit less political. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but how realistic is that? Is there any way of achieving that? Why would we expect the court to be quote unquote less political?
I mean, I think it's definitely achievable in that we've had a very balanced court in the past. I think currently what makes it so hard to achieve is that what we've seen over the past sort of half century is that the Supreme Court has become almost like a party issue that the Republican Party has sort of prioritized in their campaigns, and it's largely succeeded. Now we have a 6-3 conservative majority, and I'm going to argue what we need to do is foster more public respect for the court to maximize their independence and maybe change the way, or hopefully public pressure will change the way in which the parties sort of interact with the courts.
So we've seen over time that the court has become more political. In a study shown by Northwestern University, it was actually found that in 5-4 rulings, the court justices tended to rule based off their ideological or political views more often. I think this really shows the amount of politicization in the courts. I think we need to expect the Supreme Court to be independent of political views, because there's this sort of independent branch that's supposed to just check the powers of the other two branches and rule purely based off the Constitution.
I think.
But if let me throw in here, if we nominate by president elected by a political party and we confirm with a Senate where everybody has political affiliations, is it realistic to say we're going to be apolitical when it comes to the court? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ricky, but I wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, I think that one of the problems is that what we've seen recently is a lot of political maneuverings being made with recent nominations. If you look at Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, there's an obvious sort of contradiction there in how President Obama was not allowed to have his nomination go through while Trump was. And I think that sort of political maneuvering decreases the respectability of the courts as an institution. So I would argue that sure, there's to some term like politicization that we cannot avoid, but I would say that it's gone too far in the current state it is.
I mean, at the end, our country is built on the people, the citizens, and we look at the preamble of the Constitution. It's we the people of the United States, So in order to bring change and stop politicization, I think we always have to look towards the people and help educate them through programs like We the People with civics education to let them understand the degree of politicization within the courts. Through our votes and our voices, we could probably help shape and help change the current politicization, of course. And I think that's the way we could help and stop it.
Going off this issue of public education, the Annenberg Civic Survey of 2020 actually found that around 50% of Americans couldn't even name the three branches. And so I think this is really a really important issue that we need to promote civics education in our schools in order to let the public learn about our government and see why there are problems and how we can fix these issues.
Kenneth, I'm not sure if 77% of them couldn't name the three branches, or they just didn't want to for one reason or another, which is very possible, I think, very possible. What role should precedent play. Before Justice Barrett was even nominated, when Gorsuch and Kavanaugh made it a 5-4 majority, Clarence Thomas made a speech. And in the speech, he said he thought that the Supreme Court needed to get over being bound by precedent and not be afraid to revisit some time-honored rulings that we thought would be there for a long time. Is precedent what protects the court from political shifts? Or should, if a president nominates you and if you can manage to get through the confirmation process, should the court say our members are different now, our views are different, and we certainly have the right to revisit some rulings from the past and change them if we want to?
I think the court has an interest in sort of following precedent, because if the court doesn't follow its own preceding decisions, its sort of word loses its value. So I think the court has a natural interest in ruling in the same manner. And if you look at that, when the court has to overturn previous decisions, they have to demonstrate how those decisions specifically caused harm. And I think that's a good policy to follow when we're looking at overturning precedent.
Okay, so another case in which the court looked at the past would be Shelby County v. Holder, and they decided in this case that the previous case was not eligible because there was a change in times, and 40 years ago is not the same as today, in which the Constitution does not, or is differently today, or would not apply the same today. And so I think we need to look at time as a manner of as the issue of precedence, because over time our views change. We see the world modernizing, and we have technology, which wasn't here however decades ago. I think we really need to take into account the modern era and how our world has developed into precedence.
When we talk about precedent, I think we always have to look towards, Federal 78. And
Go ahead, man.
Where like he really emphasized, the impotence of the court, the judges is really important. And I think when we look at the courts, we look at them as like the patrol boundaries of the Constitution. I think when we look at precedent, I think the influence from the precedent is really important due to the fact that constant changes and new issues that arise within society. And if we only focus on precedent, I think when we do focus on precedent, we have to ensure that it's constitutionally proven, that it's like constitutionally based rather than political leanings or rather than political ideologies.
It was true, fellas. That was terrific. Nice job. Very good job. That was fun. That was fun to listen to. Dr. Rogers, you question first. You want to analyze a little?
So I really enjoyed your presentation. It was very thorough. I like the sort of historical view of the development of the Supreme Court's evolution in striking down state cases. Although, as my question indicated, I thought it was a little weak on sort of the early period. And you responded well to my question, but I would like to hear a little bit more on how the court is reacting to state cases. McCulloch cases, of course, very important, and Gibbons versus Ogden. So there's a lot that happens between Marbury and Lochner. And so I would have liked to hear a little bit more in there. I really like your point, and your approach was very nuanced. And when you came to the issue of counter-majoritarianism, you said it's not necessarily a pitfall. I mean, that's a very well put. Well, it is in theory, but it isn't always a bad thing. If the court is reacting to a majority that's acting in a tyrannous way. And I enjoyed the sort of your nuanced discussion as we went along. One thing about the history, just one more suggestion, is that, you mentioned the Lochner area, and you mentioned Lochner versus New York and E.C. Knight. You could have been a little clearer that the constitutional basis of those cases was slightly different. The Lochner was a substantive due process decision, as you explained, but E.C. Knight was a Commerce Clause case. So just a slight more nuance with your examples, and that would strengthen your argument. But overall, just really good, nicely documented.
Yeah, I agree. I very much enjoyed this discussion. My overall takeaway from this, and and Judge Miles, you'll want to report this, is that you call for a return to considering nominees on their merits, not just on political positions. So I guess the denial of Jeff Sessions getting a federal judgeship is back in the good old days, is what we should be doing. But there are some other points that I think. I thought you could have strengthened it. You were correct in pointing out that with the 14th Amendment and the Due Process Clause, my question, if I'd had time to ask, why was that necessary? And if you had filled in with the Barron v. Baltimore and the court's original interpretation, that would have really strengthened your position. I think you're right to be skeptical about public pressure. You pointed out that the large proportion of the population can't name the three branches of government. One of the slides I always use in my American Government's a Pew Foundation survey from 2010, when the people were asked who the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was. The good news is 53% of the population just admitted they couldn't tell you who the Chief Justice was. Of those that could, a majority did say John Roberts, but then there was a group that named Thurgood Marshall, who had been dead for quite a while by that point. John Paul Stevens, who was never Chief Justice, and my personal favorite, Harry Reid, who was in a different branch of government. So I'm always all about whether or not, Kenneth, I think you're the one that suggested we need more civic education. You may live to see us get to a better shape than this. I'm afraid that's a long-term solution, but I very much appreciated the discussion and thought you did a very good job.
Joe, we hadn't referred to this today, but as far as the confirmation process is concerned, and when we used to not confirm people, Hal Heflin was the senator from Alabama that led the fight against confirming Sessions. And one of the Republicans on the panel, who was a friend of his, came to Senator Heflin and said, "What's your problem with?" And Heflin said, "They're trying to send a boy to do a man's job."
Yeah.
And through the last administration, there were some people who would have agreed with that and some people who would have challenged it, I guess, over the last 4 years. But that quote became well known, and that tag followed Sessions into this particular. He lost to Tommy Tuberville in the runoff, and Tuberville used that story against him a bunch of times in the campaign. Emily, I'm trying to keep track now. Emily and I have a running thing going about how many times Alabama law was decided.
That's number 6, Mike.
Six. We've only seen 9 teams, Emily, and that's 6 out of 9. That's 2/3. Now, I expected it from Michigan, but I didn't think my own guys would do that to me. My own state gave me number 6 out of 9, but
they know the Constitution and case law well, Mike.
They know it very well, obviously, and that was a pretty easy one. Joe, the Shelby County line is about 5 miles from where they live, so that they couldn't hardly not cite that one, I guess. 2 more things before we go real quick. Help out. You've got Unit 3 down, and y'all are going to some fantastic schools, and they will challenge you. And this time next year, you'll be in your 2nd semester and be covered up with stuff. But email Ms. Maddox and tell her that when she needs to mentor Unit 3, y'all got it, y'all know it, put y'all on Zoom. It's a lot easier for y'all, put you on Zoom and let each of you take a day, but help teach the poor juniors that are coming up how to do this, help mentor, help prep, help do all those things, because somebody help y'all. Please don't go away. What always hurts me is to see her really good students go off to school and she has a hard time bringing them back. I think the 3 of you will help. And the last thing I would say is I think the 2 bosses had a really good afternoon right there. That was a great job by both of them. Ms. Maddox, I'll see you back home.